Thank you for coming. My name is Carla Akins. Welcome to my writing cafe. I am super excited. I have with me today Brian Godawa. Did I say your name right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. He's a prolific writer, and I am extremely interested to learn all about this writer's process and how he got started writing what he's writing right now. Brian is not just the author of books, but he is a scriptwriter and has movies that have been produced. So we're going to learn a lot from him. And thank you, Brian, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me on here.
I'm super excited about this. So why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself? I'm especially my readers and my audience. We have a lot of writers that would be really interested in how you started out with movies. And I am interested in that too, because I actually started out writing musicals.
So, interesting. Yeah. Well, yeah, there is kind of a little story to it. When I was in college, I've always been an artist, and I was trained as a visual artist, actually. So in illustration and graphic design and such. But when I was graduating college, I had always loved movies. But what happened was I studied Francis Schaeffer, who is a Christian philosopher from the 70s, long dead now. And
I know who that is.
Yeah, his work helped me to start to understand my art more within the context of a Christian worldview, because I didn't have an understanding of that. And I've always loved movies. So I started seeing movies differently. I started to understand them in a better way. So I actually did some study of film on my last year of college. But when I got out, I'm like, okay, I want to pursue screenwriting because I believe in movies. They're powerful. They change lives. They've affected my life so dramatically. And so, but in that day, we're talking decades ago, there wasn't much out there. I mean, if you didn't go to USC or UCLA, which I wasn't going to do that, and I didn't want to be a starving artist. So what I did was I just pursued my graphic design career, got married, and I studied screenwriting on the side. So I just bought all the books I could get. I went to all the seminars. I went to pitch meetings. I just cold call people and all that. Just did my own hard work in terms of trying to break into the business. But it took many years. Gosh, I don't even remember how many now. But there was years that I was writing multiple scripts, trying to get interests, but before my first movie was made in 2001, right? So, yeah, I'd been writing quite a few years before that, and that's typical for many people. I mean, there are some people get fresh out of college and sell stuff, but I think when you're sort of studying it on your own, you're taking that process. It's more old school, but. It's not unusual because the business is so hard to break into. Well, the funny thing was so I basically followed all the directions in the books about how to break into Hollywood, right? And the number one thing is, of course, you have to really study your craft of writing. You have there's a whole well, now we know there's story gurus out there like Robert McKee and all these guys. When I started out, there was one guy, Sid Field. And now, there's dozens of people writing about it. But so what I did was I basically just did everything that they recommended, go to these seminars, go to pitch meetings, cold call producers. And, you just have to do that for a long time before you might get some interest. Well, what happened was I had an opportunity to move close to LA because I was actually in Chicago, and you really kind of need to be near the business to get a career going. And so that I got a job out in California, and that enabled me to be more serious about looking for work. But it was really funny because everything that I've been doing to break into the Hollywood, as I was writing my spec scripts, I had, 3 or 4 of them written. The way that I actually broke in was the most unconventional way, which also goes to prove that there's a million ways to break in, and don't don't trust just one perspective. Have hope, because there's many ways that this can happen. But I was actually down in Orange County, and I actually was going to a church where one of the pastors quoted Friedrich Nietzsche and Francis Schaeffer in the same sermon. I thought, I love this guy, because that's the kind of stuff I'm interested in. Secular philosophers, but also Christian philosophy, and how does that work together? All this. Well, it turns out he'd been doing movie producing on the side, and one thing led to another. He loved my writing. We simpatico. And then I ended up writing my first movie, which was To End All Wars. He had the rights to that book for like 20 years. He had the rights to that thing. Wow. And when I came on board, finally, I was able to get a script for him that got an interest in a director, et cetera. So I broke in a very unconventional way, but I still believe you have to try every angle, because you don't know which angle is going to work. Right. And so that was sort of my launch into the business. But the thing about it is, it's a cutthroat business, and there's a common misunderstanding that if I could just get my break in, sell my first script, make my first movie, then I'll be broken, and then I can start getting work, and I'll be like I'll break in, and that does happen to some people, certainly, but the bulk of people, it doesn't. Right. And it didn't happen to me. In fact, I made my movie, and it seemed to benefit the director's career, but it did not seem to benefit mine. And I literally got to the point where, I wasn't getting phone calls. I wasn't getting people interested in me writing their scripts, I literally felt like I was starting all over again from square one. And it was very depressing for me that year, facing that reality and just having to go, you know what, you have to be the one to do the work, the hard work. And you can't rely upon your laurels. You can't rely upon other people making it happen for you. You have to push on every level to make your career go forward. And that is what even good writers, producers, actors, directors, even good people in Hollywood have to do that. We don't all get those lucky breaks, and then we're writing $1 million scripts and stuff like that. So, it was tough. So it was hard work. What
it reminds me of is that your steps are ordered of the Lord. And one of the things that the Lord tells me to do for myself is just show up. Yeah. Show up to the assignment I give you. Just show up, because that assignment is going to build on the next assignment, And if you're faithful, eventually it's just like in sales, they say, I many years ago I cannot sell water in a desert. I mean, I'm not a salesperson. So, but one of the things that I do know that worked when I was selling door to door life insurance back in the early 80s was that it's all about numbers. It's like how many doors you knock on, and eventually you're going to get a yes. And I think that's how it is with not just our writing careers, but in a lot of ways. We got to show up. We got to show up.
No, absolutely. And that's a famous Woody Allen saying too,
Oh, really?
And it really is true. Like,
I didn't know that.
you just go to the meetings, you go to parties, you just got to hang around, and things sort of jive together over time, and a lot of it is relationships, by the way.
It is.
You have to have a baseline talent to be able to get, to be able to be operating in that realm, but that's not enough. That's the revelation that a lot of writers have a hard time realizing. It's not enough to just be a good writer. It really does come down to who you know and relationships. And over the years, the work I've gotten has been through producers that I've had some kind of relation, not like it doesn't have to be a close one, but just some kind of a working or a interacting relationship. Maybe go to coffee every once in a while, something like that. That's where I've gotten a lot of my work. Even though you'd think, hey, I'm the guy who wrote To End All Wars. Why aren't they calling me? And I would even have to call producers who did work with me and knew me.
Right.
And I would have to remind them, hey, you got any work? You need a writer for something? And they're like, oh yeah, now that you say that, I've got this project you would be perfect for. And I would also think in my mind, well, you know me and you worked with me, I'm good enough to do it. Why wouldn't they think of it? I soon came to realize that particularly in Hollywood and the movie business, everybody's juggling so many balls. Like I have to be working on like 5-6 possible projects for hopefully one of them to happen. And even then it rarely does. Right. So imagine producers, directors, everyone's like trying to have like 6-7 different projects to get and hoping that one will happen. Well, what happens is when you're so busy with all these juggling things, you're not going to think of the people you think of are the ones you're most immediately in context with. That's why I realized I had to just start calling them up and just, hey, how you doing? This is Brian, this is what I'm doing. What are you working on? Oh, good. Hey, got any projects? No, that's good. Just sort of keep in their face. And that was how I started realizing that's where the relationship comes in. So, and, there's a whole lot of aspects about that, but that's sort of my beginning. And over the years, I actually transitioned to become more of a book writer, and I still do make movies. In fact, I've got a movie coming out in a couple of months. It's going to be shocking and controversial, but we'll see what happens. And then I've actually got a Bible movie that's being made on the book of Ruth that they're going to start shooting soon. Sony Affirm Pictures has it. So, but that's all stuff I did years ago. And, it takes a long time. Yeah. Years. You have to do so many irons in the fire. And the other element of professionalism is one of the things that I learned was you have to give up this belief that like, this is my baby, this spec script, or even, I remember there were projects where it's like, oh, I'm the perfect person for that project. I know I am because I knew a lot about the person or, whatever. I just felt like, oh, this is mine. This has to be from the Lord. And it wouldn't pan out. And I was absolutely certain it was from the Lord, couldn't it be a better fit, et cetera. And you have to learn to give up your hopes and dreams about what you think this is mine or this is from the Lord, because the Lord surprises you with whatever he wants. And but the point of it is, it's not just that's what a professional is. A professional is someone who doesn't cling on to the things that are most special to him. There's a realism where you realize there's commerce and art. And these things work together, and they sometimes work apart. And you have to realize when they're not gonna, that they're gonna pay this other person because he has a different connection or whatever. They're not gonna pay me the money I believe I deserve. And you just have to move on and say, well, that's okay because I've got other projects that I'm going to pursue. But when you put all your eggs in one basket, a lot of times writers, I've met many screenwriters or people who wanted to be screenwriters and they would work for 5-6 years on one script, and it's just like, no, that's not how it works. You have to keep moving, be writing the next script and the next script and know that like, I'll write 10 scripts and maybe one will get made, but it's the act and the forward motion of practice that makes you the professional writer. The people who just write their one thing and hope that and put all their eggs in that basket, they're not going to be successful writers in general. That's what I've come to.
Well, and the market has changed so much just in the last 5 years, for especially in the Christian market. They don't agents and publishing companies are just not taking people unless you have a really big platform. They don't want to see. And so it has changed so much that we have now writers. It's not okay just to be a writer. You have to be a business person.
Exactly. And a marketer.
Yes.
And it's funny because they've been asking you like, well, what are you going to do to market it? So, which by the way, we'll get into that in a minute. Self-publishing. That's why I believe much more in self-publishing than traditional publishing, because you're going to do all the work anyway. You might as well make the benefit of the money. At least you'll actually make 70% royalty instead of 5% royalty or 10%. Right. But what happened was, I was pursuing that career of writing and did it for years, got a few movies made, not a lot. I did some documentaries that I wrote and directed, got a couple features made, one of a Frank Peretti novel, The Visitation and stuff.
Yes.
Nothing that was really great or anything. My most beloved piece was To End All Wars, which was my first project. And Plus, it was a situation where I was the only writer. They couldn't afford it. They didn't have a lot of money, so they had to just keep moving forward, and they didn't have time to keep redoing things, which once you get in the big money in Hollywood, they keep redoing things, rewriting, have other writers come in. Right. And that's where it's just sort of like, why bother, or it's like that thing that was my baby is like a monster now. And well, in the independent realm, the benefit is they can't afford to keep doing it. So a lot of times you get to be the only writer, and that's a benefit, and that was good. And so that was a real blessing. And even to this day, I'm so grateful for that. And that it was probably the best thing I've ever gotten made. Not necessarily the best script I've written, but the best thing I've gotten made. Well, the other thing about Hollywood is there's up and down years, and even the best of players will have bad years, right? And so I had a couple bad years there, and it kind of forced me to go, maybe I can't make it just as a screenwriter, because that's what I was kind of focusing on. And it forced me to reinvent myself and say, how can I expand my opportunities? And this was a transformational point in my life, because it was coming to realize, the famous saying, Hollywood is the boulevard of broken dreams. And I can tell you, I know so many people who were like 40 years plus still holding on to the dream of breaking in as they're struggling as editors or actors,
because you're told in America, just believe. Absolutely.
Well, so Mike Rowe has this great video on PragerU, and it's called something like don't follow your dreams, follow your opportunities, or something like that. And Mike Rowe was explaining this concept, and it totally hit home with me, because I thought that's what happened to me. What happened to me was I realized I was grasping on. I wanted to only do Hollywood movies with a Christian worldview, and I didn't want to do Christian movies because I just didn't tend to like them. They're not well done, etc. And I had this vision and this dream, and I just kept holding on. I would turn down other possibilities and focusing. But then when I had the bad years, I had to consider other things, and it opened my mind up. And I thought, well, you know what? Why not do novels? But what was interesting was, what got me there was I wrote a script about a Bible movie that I thought, okay, Hollywood and the religious community could both love this, because it would be fantastical and somewhat mythical, and Hollywood would like that side, but then it would be biblical, so Christians might like it, and you could maybe make it happen. And of course, the story was about Noah, and the flood, and you've got these strange Nephilim giants and all this stuff, right? So I was writing this, and I got it done, and I was going around town as a script. But, I'm a small guy, so it was very difficult for me. But then I heard Darren Aronofsky was making the Noah movie. And then I realized, I'm not going to be able, he's going to get his made before I could mine. But I thought, how can I beat him to the punch? Because I don't want him to look like I'm derivative, right? And why don't I just adapt it into a novel? I've been talking about that for a while, right? And this was when Kindle was just starting to sort of crest and becoming really big on Amazon. And so I wrote my first novel, and I still went about it traditionally. I tried to get a Christian agent, because a Christian book, pretty much. I mean, a Bible story, right? But the thing is, though, I had Hollywood sensibilities, so I kind of wrote it almost R-rated, or now it's PG-13. I did edit it since then, but my thing was like, hey, I want this to be like a blockbuster Hollywood movie, and I don't want to hide sin, and that's one thing I don't like about Christian work is they tend to downplay the sin because whatever, the offensiveness or what have you. But in my mind, the power of the redemption of your storytelling will only be equal to the accuracy with which you depict the sin from which you're being redeemed. And so anyway, I couldn't get a Christian publisher, and I couldn't get a Christian agent interested in it, because it was sort of like, and by the way, it was my first novel, so it may not have been that good. I'm not the great American novel writer, so I'm under no delusion there. I know I'm a good storyteller, but I wasn't a great novel writer. So that might have been part of the problem too. But nevertheless, even since that time, it's just, I've blown away all the categories of sales, and Christian publishers wouldn't be interested in my work, because it's just in that weird in between world,
It's nice and gritty. I listened to Enoch Primordial today, and you also have a very good you have a very good narrating voice as far
thanks.
as your English your pronunciations and everything. You're very easy to understand. I have that Kansas twang that gets in there all the time, but I really enjoy. You have such a dry sense of humor, and you put these little zingers in every once in a while.
Yeah.
And I have to fight Tampa traffic every day because I teach, and I'm just sitting in my car just laughing, like
That's great.
I was trying. I knew I was going to forget, but like let's go kick some shank, instead of the other one.
Yeah.
And then the constipated giants, I about died. I was sitting at a stoplight laughing so hard about that.
That's great.
But then you also put in, the lust and the desires and everything that men were feeling for their the opposite sex and things like that. And I really enjoy your voice, your writing voice.
Well, thank you. It helps because I've been a public speaker for many years. I even did some acting in my day. So, I've always been a sort of an exhibitionist, so fortunately and because of my graphic design background, I also design all my book covers. So
they're beautiful.
I do all my marketing.
So did you do all that art behind you there?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are
awesome.
Those are the posters for all the series.
Yeah.
So now not everyone can do that, but here's what happened. So I realized that maybe my dream is not going to come. I thought God gave me this dream, and I actually, some people would even look at me and say, well, you're making movies, Brian, but let me tell you, not very many. And it's really hard to get made. And, I was looking at some really bad times, so I had to readjust. And I came to realize that what Mike Rowe says, which is, don't follow your dreams, follow your opportunities, because it's the people who get crushed because their dreams are often not fulfilled. Yeah, there's maybe one or two at the top who get their dreams fulfilled. But if you're pursuing something and you get an opportunity, it may not be exactly what you wanted to do, or it may not, but if you're talented, you can do it, and it's the opportunity and it results in some success or what have you, right? Then you follow it and you adjust your own sort of expectations and and realizing that maybe what God has in store for me might be different than what I had in store, and the irony of it is, I started writing those in 2001. And the thing of it was that started with one script, and it became one book. And then it did really well, and it was selling really well. And I realized, maybe, I can make some money as a living as a writer of novels. So what more can I do? And I realized you need to I learned that ideally you want to do series. And I realized though that, oh my goodness, Noah was just the tip of the ziggurat in terms of the storyline that goes through the Bible, that deals with giants and watchers and all this supernatural stuff that I was sort of discovering. Yeah. And I realized, oh, wow, I could probably get 3 or 4 books out of this. Right? Of course, now I'm up to like 12 or 13, right?
Right.
And so it's like, oh, there's way more than I realized. But I loved it enough to keep doing it. It's like, I'm not saying God's going to give you something that you hate to do.
No.
I don't believe that. But it was like, well, this wasn't my dream, but I do get to tell stories, and I love theology. What happened was, the writing novels gave me an opportunity to add something that I didn't realize. I've always loved and studied theology throughout my years. And we're talking stuff that other Christians often don't like to even talk about or don't care to talk about. So in other words, I felt like I would study a lot of stuff in the Bible that I didn't get to talk about or share with people, right?
Yeah.
But all of a sudden in my novels, everything I've studied over the decades, it's all in there.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, God gave me an opportunity to blend my storytelling, which is what I wanted to do with movies, with my theology in a way I didn't even, more utilizing my gifts than I ever realized, right? That's basically what I'm trying to get to. Yeah. And the funny thing is, see, like I say, there are some people who like, it's their dream to be writers. I'm a storyteller. Again, I do love writing novels, but I'm not the great American novelist. And to me, I want to tell stories more than anything. And so I still am working on independent movie projects. I still would love to make a movie as much or more than writing a book.
Right.
But I've been able to make a living writing the novels so that I don't have to be desperate when it comes to movies. Because the other thing is in the Hollywood or the movie business, I've been more on the independent side, not the studio movies, but the little independent movies. But even in that world, you basically get opportunities that come to you that aren't all that great, but it's like, you just got to do it because you got to work your way up the ladder, et cetera. Right. And I don't mean even moral things, just like maybe just like, that's not an interesting story. I'm not interested in writing it. But if you turn it down, you're not going to get more work from those people.
Yeah. Right.
So, but here's the thing though, that can also create a kind of a whorish mentality in your life as a writer, where you just become this person who just doesn't have your own vision, and you just end up doing everybody else's stuff all the time because that's the only thing you can get, right?
Right.
Well, having my novel writing has allowed me to turn movie projects down. That's like, nah, I don't believe in that, or that's not a story I'm excited to tell. That one I believe in. That one is worth my time, And I'm grateful I have that privilege, and I don't know how long it will last, but that's kind of how those two have sort of worked their way out. And so I've been writing novels since 2001, and it's funny you say the reading, because I just recently reread my Noah novel, the very first novel, because the first novel I did, it was also my first audiobook. And even though I had professional speaking abilities, I didn't know, I didn't have enough experience on how to read an audiobook. So if you were to listen to my Noah novel, it was way too fast. I'm like, there's no breaks. It was just like, I just kept reading the lines, because I thought that if I stopped, if I was too slow, people would get bored. And over the years, I realized, no. You really, you want to tell it like you're at a campfire, and you'll stop and go, it was quiet. And then, and you
smack your lips. It's smacking their lips.
Yeah. So anyway, so I just...
Or Enoch, I guess I don't know. No, it was Lamech, I think, that was smacking, or Methuselah, smacking their lips.
Yeah.
It was funny.
But so the point of that was just that you learn, and so all this time I've been self-publishing, so I have to learn. And the great thing about self-publishing is I've also made multiple editions of my novels. As the years went on, I sort of learned more things. I would go back and fix them, change them and stuff. And, that can be kind of looked upon as being amateurish, granted.
No, because you know what? My first novel, I've only had one novel published, but it was edited so poorly. And it was by a publisher. I just cringed, because it's like, I wish I could get it back and redo it. Because the editing isn't that good. And there's other things I've written for the homeschool market that are floating around out there, and it's like, the editing wasn't very good. So
now that is another thing I learned early on, and I did get an editor. When I first started, I just didn't know where to get them, and it wasn't as, now you can get everything on the internet, but at the time, I didn't know where to look for them. And so I moved forward. I just started writing my novels, but then eventually I found someone who was a friend, and she did editing, and she said, "Hey, Brian, I love your storytelling, but man, your writing really needs some work on the grammar and stuff." And I said, so in other words, she loved the novels already. I go, well, hey, I'll pay you to edit them. So she went back and she edited the first one. So, and then over the years, I found now my most recent editor, she's fantastic.
I love editors.
It is so worth the money. I cannot tell you,
Yeah, you really do. That's the one thing I wish more people who self-publish, the editing is so important. Because it separates you. I would not know that your novels, it used to be when something was self-published, you knew it was self-published.
Yeah.
And now, it has evolved to where it's completely reputable to be self-published. And there's even some of the organizations out there are recognizing those books and putting them and honoring them with awards and things that you didn't get to enter before.
Well, not only that, but like some of the, a lot of the top sellers on Amazon are all self-published. In fact, there are self-published authors. There's so many making 6 figures and 7 figures that I've heard self-publishers turn down publishing deals because it's not enough money. Yeah, it's like, I'm doing better on my own. So it's like, I don't need you, Well, and that's encouraging because look, if there's someone who wants to do the traditional route, that's fine. I understand. There are certain things about respect and
absolutely.
And, I get that. But what's so exciting is if you want to try that, fine. But the exciting thing is, but if you do all the work, get that novel and you can't get an agent and you can't get it published, well, at least now you don't have to put it on the shelf. You can just self-publish it yourself. And you might be surprised in doing better because these niche, like you said, and this gets back to what you brought this up earlier. And I saw this as well, that if you're not a celebrity or, come with a big audience and all this, it's like they don't put money into good writers. They put money into celebrities and big opportunities, just like Hollywood's looking for the blockbuster, right?
Because they have to make money.
Yeah. And also though, there's the mahogany desk syndrome, they call it, where, they've got their overhead. So they have to, over the years, they build up these, and it's based on the numbers and what they've sold and they have analysis, but it sticks them in this sort of like, this is what's selling now because this is what the buzz is. But what they don't realize is like, there's so many genres that, Amish vampire stories, no one's going to buy those. Well, guess what? They're huge. You know what I mean? Like they're huge. And it's like, but that's what self-publishing affords is it affords you at least the chance to go with what you really love and believe in. And ironically, when people are writing what they really love, I really believe they write the best. You know what I mean? So like when someone goes, well, who's going to like an Amish vampire story? But I just, this is what I love. And sure enough, if you love it, it's the best writing anyway. And chances are you'll get a lot of people interested.
Well, that's what you're called to, right? That's the audience you're supposed to reach.
Yeah.
It's who God's called you, anointed you to find favor with. And, and I love that, following your opportunities. Sometimes I wonder, why am I teaching public school? But there's a reason, I don't know. God knows the beginning and the end. And there's so much more involved than what our finite minds can comprehend. And I've had a novel with my agent for, several years now, but the Christian market had kept turning it down because it's too gritty, because it dealt with, sex trafficking back in the 1800s when women were sold down south in Louisiana as second wives, and they didn't want to touch it. So, it happens. Even if you have an agent, it doesn't mean you're going to sell anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was funny too, because like when I first started, I actually did not think that I was going to do so well, because precisely I was in this predicament where it's like, all right, I want to write this bizarre theological stuff like giants and stuff. And at the time, it was kind of new to me, and I'm thinking, and I want to retell Bible stories with giants in them. Like, are Christians going to think I'm playing with the word of God? You know what I mean? Like, well,
some are,
and some of them do. Yeah, no, I know that. But that's one of the reasons why I thought, I don't know if they get the imagination component that I understood. And so I wasn't really sure that it would do well. And the other thing was, if you look at the Bible fiction category, it's basically women writers telling stories about women in the Bible, which are good. Sarah, all of them. But it was so funny because it's like they're all women's stories, and I'm thinking like, here I am doing like Bible warrior.
We need those, yeah.
I know, but at the time, I'm thinking like, no one's gonna buy this, because it's not in the category. But I loved it, and by the way, I love romance, and so I always love to have romance in my stories anyway. But
he does, guys. He has romance in his stories.
It does. In fact, I will say this.
Surprised me. That really surprised me, and I wish we had more time because I have so many questions to ask you. Maybe I can have you on again. I'm greedy because I have questions I want to ask you about that, but go ahead.
No, I just want to say that you know, I wrote it because I really believed in it. And so here's another thing. Successful writer or a professional writer, whatever you want to say, rather than the wannabe. There's always a component of realism. And by the way, you'll see this in the greatest writers in history, whether it's Dickens or whatever. Sometimes you got to deal with money. You got to make money. You got to make a living. So you got to write things for money. Sometimes you got to take the job that's not the writing job because you need to make a living. And therefore you have less time to write. But you just, okay, well then if I only have 2 hours a night or 1 hour a night, I'm just going to, a real writer, let's put it that way, rather than the wannabe, is gonna do what they have to do, and if they get cut down to 1 hour a night, they're still gonna write that 1 hour a night, right?
Yeah, they are.
And that's the difference between the real writers and the wannabes, you know. But also that following that opportunity rather than the dreams, there's a maturity, I believe, that allows you to grow and see things that you don't see. Because when you're grasping onto those dreams, like an adolescent, like a juvenile, you can't see some of the things and you can't see where they're going to be. But when you open up and you say, well, you know, I got to be a little bit realistic, then things can happen that you weren't aware of, you know? So,
well, just like I heard someone saying, when you're hanging on to something, your hands aren't open.
Yeah.
Going to receive what else God has for you, you know? So
perfect.
And I try to remember that. And,
by the way, you know what one of those elements is? The realities of the book world, the reading world, is whatever you tend to break in as an author, that's, you know, you're going to have to write a lot of that because that's what the people want more of, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a realism to that very few authors can break out and do all different genres, right? There are some who can, but in terms of you have to realize, okay, I did really well in this, and now I have to do more of this, and there's nothing wrong with that. But like, for instance, I'm going to be eventually writing a thriller, a serial killer thriller, which is like, you know, totally not at all like all my Bible novels, right? Well, the reality of the audience is, you'd think like, well, if they love my writing, they'll love this too. But no, they are expecting the same Bible stuff. And there's some of them, of course, will, but a lot of them will go, well, no, this isn't what you write, you know? Yeah. So you almost have to create either a second name or market it separately as if you're starting all over again.
Right.
And I'm going to embrace that reality because I want to do this novel so much that I'm willing to take that risk. But there's a side of me that goes, you know, I'm going to be writing these Bible novels. I've still got about a good, you know, 5 or 6 left in me that I want to write.
There's so many.
But it's like, I know, listen, I just know that like, I could go and write other things now. Okay. But I'm realizing realistically, got to make that living. This is what people want. This is my audience wants. And as long as I still love it, I'm happy to do it. I'm just saying writers have to sort of there's that realism of saying, if you ever do sort of start to do well, you're going to have to realize that that's what you're going to be known for. So you're going to have to focus and just give more and more of that. And when you get tempted to go, I want to do something different, you're going to have to realize that it'll be like you're starting all over again, which is fine. And it's worth the risk if you want to, but you have to be aware of that reality, if that makes sense.
That's really good. That's really interesting. Yeah. Very, very interesting. Yeah. I was just telling someone, I don't think I could do serial killer type because I'm too empathetic. I don't think I want that stuff in my head. Oh my goodness. I have just so many questions, but you have shared so many wonderful things with me. Let me try to find, let's see. So what book, when you were growing up, can you think of a book that influenced you as a child and had left an impression on you?
Well, yeah, I read a lot when I was in high school. I became a real avid reader of novels and stuff. It's funny, I don't read as many novels now as I used to when I was younger. in terms of storytelling, I would say actually Lord of the Rings was probably in my high school years. But listen, Jaws, Dune, I read all those, and they were all like just amazing worlds that enveloped me, but it's interesting though, because what that was pointing to was movies for me personally at the time. And then of course the movies came out based on those, but so in a very real sense, I would have to say that I would want to give movies that have influenced me, because that they've also, in the reverse way, they've influenced me for movies, but they've also influenced my storytelling in my novels. And that would be the first movie that made me want to actually make movies was Chariots of Fire. And that's, Oscar way back in 1981 or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
And when I saw the movie, I said, muscular Christianity, you can tell a Hollywood secular movie story with a Christian worldview and still be good. Now, I think the world's very different now, sadly. Yes. And I don't want to get into how I think Hollywood is dead, actually. And that's one of the reasons why I moved out of LA. But nevertheless, that got me in, and that was always my sort of standard. But then Braveheart is the movie that has affected me as a screenwriter on every level of drama, writing, storytelling.
Love that movie too.
Story structure. It's the movie that I always refer to when I'm just working on a new movie. I'm thinking, is this going to work? And I go, well, Braveheart, they did this, and so those, in some ways, movies are more influencing on me than books.
Well, and that's the culture, that's the culture you were exposed to. I was exposed to more books than movies. We didn't have television in my house, other than we had like this TV that was about this big, and it was black and white, because my dad was very into books. So we had a house full of books. But I will say, and I know this is cheesy, but one of the soundtracks that I always put on when I'm wanting to get my juices flowing and I'm just kind of not, just kind of need some inspiration, is Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah. That movie had a huge influence on the way I saw storytelling and picture it in my head. I just felt it was so riveting. It was just like one thing after the other, and unpredictable. I think that was the first movie that had so many unpredictable moments. Yeah. As far as stunts and things like that. It changed movies in the sense of, after that, movies couldn't have slow moments. Or let's put it this way. Every scene had to have something, because obviously every movie isn't going to be an action movie, but it affected all movies. It really did. In the pacing, it did. And that even now when I write, I'm like, every scene in my novel has to have something that's really interesting to me, whether it's a shocker or, whatever. Constipated action. Giant. Yeah, or constipated, or humor, But it's got to be more than just developing the character. It's got to have an entertaining quotient to it. Every single scene, Well, one thing I was thinking about, when I was listening today, it's like, I bet gamers love your books, because you have a lot of action, a lot of that LARPing and stuff in those books. And I thought, I bet gamers really like your books. Well, that could very well be. And also, I think that where I have been criticized is from those who are more literary, right? It's usually been like, well, he's a screenwriter, so he writes, the books are written sort of shallow and actiony and all this kind of stuff, which is not technically true, because I'm going to make an argument defending it, but I will acknowledge that I don't have the patience that other novelists have and readers of novels to go into too much. So I do write more fast-paced, more like a movie, and therefore I don't get in as much detail as other writers do at times. However, I will say this in my defense, what I think makes it work is, and for those who want that more detail, then maybe that's not for them, but in my defense, the thing I learned from Hollywood storytelling that I think more novelists should learn from is that
you can do more with less. In other words, sometimes or let's put it this way, when you have to communicate the same information in less amount of words or time, it forces you to be much sharper and on target. Because in a movie, I'm like, I only have 120 pages. How can I communicate that this guy's a brilliant genius or something like that in a way that is believable yet quickly? Well, if you're doing that in novels, it also means you reveal character through choices and actions that people do, which is what life is anyway, right? In other words, I don't necessarily afford a lot of luxury on, long meandering monologues in the person's head, that kind of a thing. It's like,
no, but yeah, your characters are very well developed. I mean, they have a lot of, I was pretty impressed with the character arcs and stuff, that you really do reveal a lot of inner demons and inner, things that people are struggling with and thinking about. And I thought it was very, very good. One thing about the story about Enoch, which has nothing to do with your craft, but I thought it was kind of interesting because I never pictured them. I don't know why. I just pictured Enoch and Adam and them kind of living in a cave. I never really pictured them living in a house with a door and sitting at a dinner table. And you had them like that, and you had them where someone came to the door or something. I don't know. So,
by the way, though, I do research on all my stories.
Absolutely.
And
that's some more I wanted to get into, but I don't want to take up all your
right. But just from the storytelling angle, I was surprised myself that looking into ancient Sumer and stuff like that, it's like, oh yeah, they had houses and doors. Okay, I'm like, I didn't make that up.
I just never thought about it.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I never pictured it that way. I always picture, even, I don't know, I just thought they lived in tents and caves, and
some of them did, but but they were ancients. That was the other thing I loved about my series, is just learning about ancient civilizations like Sumer and Eridu and Uruk and all these Mesopotamian worlds that we just hear a little bit of, but when you study them, you're like, oh wow, it's amazing stuff that was going on back then that we don't know about. Yeah.
Well, and I really like that you clear up. I think that if people will read some of your things, it would clear up some misconceptions, because a lot of people read the Mesopotamian stories and stuff and they think, oh, well, the Bible stole that from, whereas it's not quite like that.
My angle, my personal perception is, if something like a flood happened, or let's put it this way, we look around the world and we see, there are flood legends in every culture, right?
Right.
So that's the fact. And that's an interesting fact, because if you read them, there's a lot of similarities, right? Well, depending on your worldview is going to determine how you're going to interpret it. Now, if you're atheist and an evolutionary, so you're going to look at that and go, oh, well, obviously then they borrowed from each other. And over time they borrowed and changed. Now, there could be some truth to that at times in general, but specifically it's like, well, no, that's not the only possibility. The other possibility is there really was an event like a flood of some kind. And it would make sense then that if there was an event like that, and nations over the millennia or even over hundreds of years, right? Then those families spread out on the earth, right? And they create their own tribes. They're going to retell the story in their own words, and it's going to change. And it's going to make sense that you're going to have commonalities, but differences, because there was a true event, but then they all told their own version of the story. And that's where, as a Christian, I'm not afraid to acknowledge that there's some truth in all pagan, religions and literature. I interpret it through the Bible, but it's like there's going to be some truth. You just have to find out, where did sin twist it, and that's what I seek to do. That's what I try to do, where I bring in the ancient myths. Like, I tell the story of Gilgamesh, which is a pagan myth, right? Or a pagan story. But I try to incorporate it into my biblical paradigm, right? And have it make sense in relation to Noah.
Right.
And
Just
so,
like you brought Lilith into Enoch.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that was pretty clever. I thought that was good. Yeah, I can't remember what I was going to ask you, but let's see. What was it? Oh, it had something to do with, oh, I know. There's a question I've been dying to ask. It has nothing to do with your writing. It has to do with your research. You know, the little handbags, the Acadians or the Anunnaki are always carrying in the release. What are those? Do you know? Does anyone know what they are?
It's been a while since I've been in on that world of the Acadian world and stuff, but I do know what you're talking about.
The Anunnaki.
Yeah, right. And I think some of it has to do with, if I remember correctly, because it's been a while, but has something to do with sort of like their pouches of whether it's herbs or seeds, but it's symbolically speaking, it's like this is where they draw their not necessarily their powers, but this is their little bag of wisdom and talismans. Exactly. That's what I remember of it. It's like I said, it's been a while though.
Oh man, I was hoping it was something more exotic. It
might be
like a battery or something.
I can't learn everything. I can't find everything out.
Well, and we don't know everything. I mean, there are so many mysteries, and that's why I enjoy books about ancient history. And that's why, my library is too overflowing with all my ancient history and your book. I actually bought one of your giant books like years ago.
Yeah.
And and I tried to find it today. I have way too many books, but and a lot of them are still packed because we moved to Florida about 3 years ago, and I have not had time to unpack all my books. But yeah. So, well, what are you releasing right now that you want us to talk about real quick? And
Sure.
I'm going to make sure that your books are up on the screen.
Sure.
So
well, my latest novel is Moses Against the Gods of Egypt. And I'm really proud of this one because it's a take on the 10 plagues that hasn't really been done before, but it is theologically meaningful in connection with the Watcher paradigm that all my whole series is about. And I really love it. And plus there are some amazing things about Moses that as much as I love Charlton Heston, as much as I love the 10 Commandments, Moses Moses had a stuttering problem. And it's like, whoa. And so I put that into the novel. So there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be new and fresh to people. But then also because everything's so researched, my readers love this. So I always offer a companion book. Used to be an appendix, like in Chronicles of the Nephilim, there was an appendix about my research. But now with each book, I have a separate book because there's just so much.
That's really smart.
I love it. And people love it because they want to know the background. So, so I have a companion book called The Spiritual World of Moses and Egypt. And, when you get the Moses novel, there's a little ad in there. You can find it.
I can't wait to see it.
So yeah, that's the newest big release. But actually, just last week, I released a short booklet called Leviathan and Behemoth.
I got that email. I haven't had a chance to click on everything yet. So I'm excited about that. Leviathan
is one of my favorite mysterious characters of the Bible because there's a lot of theological meaning to it.
Right.
And then, of course, everyone, is it a real monster? Is it extinct? Is it a dinosaur? Well, what's most important to me is the meaning of it in the scriptures. What is it used to communicate? And I've written a little bit about it in all my series because the Leviathan shows up in my novel series. But I wanted to put it all together and do a more comprehensive little booklet. And so that I just released and selling like hotcakes. People love that kind of stuff. So, yeah. And you can get it all on Amazon. Everything's on Amazon, ebook, paperback, and usually audiobook exclusively on Amazon.
Yes. And his audiobook is very good, at least the one I'm listening to right now. And I like to listen to audiobooks when I'm having to work full time because I don't have the luxury of getting to read for pleasure as much as I would like to read for pleasure. And I agree. I think having a companion book is an excellent idea, because every time I read, like the Steve Quayle, all of Steve Quayle's books, you know, he like has those footnotes like crazy, and Timothy Alberino, his Birthright book. I read those footnotes, man. I'm looking that stuff up, and I'm reading those footnotes just as much as I'm reading the book, because I want to learn that stuff. And I love novels. My favorite novels are the kind of novels where you learn something, and while you're being entertained. That's the kind of novel I love. So I always liked the medical thrillers and things like that, because I like learning new things.
Michael Crichton is one of my favorite authors. In fact, Michael Crichton was the one that inspired me to when I first wrote the Moses novel. He always has an appendix explaining the science behind his fiction. And I thought, hey, I should do the same thing with mine, only mine will be Bible, Bible research, And so he was the one that inspired me to kind of do that.
Yeah. So if you're a nerd like I am, you're going to love Brian's books, because you definitely learn a lot. And there's just, I was going to ask you how you managed to write female characters, because you do a pretty good job of it. I thought you did a really good job.
Oh, thanks.
On what's her name? Adina? Is it Adina or Edna?
Edna.
Yeah. Edna.
Okay.
Is it? Were there two Ednas for real, or did you make that up? Do you remember?
No,
I know you've slept since then.
I think so. I think I made that one up. That was just, that was for an interesting character thing. Yeah.
I love that you include the women in there, and
listen,
that's something we don't think about. And I love that you. This is why I like books written about Bible characters, because as you're a kid growing up, going to Sunday school and stuff, or when you even just read the Bible, it's hard to picture them as real people. They're so mythological in our mind.
Yeah.
And for Enoch, to be sitting there at dinner and getting in an argument with Lamech over what's more spiritual, eating what God has provided, or praying, I thought that's brilliant, and I bet that Enoch I bet it did bother people how much he didn't want to get around people, because he was such an introvert and wanted to spend time with the Lord all the time.
You're absolutely right. In fact, that's as I write the novels, the same thing happens to me. It's like, because I'm like going, well, they're normal people like us. I mean, sure, there's a difference of some knowledge, but they're still human beings with the same human nature. So it's like when you start exploring their characters, you start realizing how very human they are. By the way, Moses, he had an anger problem. He had father issues. Mm-hmm. I mean, Elijah, in my Jezebel novel, I was like blown away. Like Elijah, this big prophetic character that, countered the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, right? Well, yeah, but if you look closely, you realize he's a little coward. Right after he does that, he runs away from Jezebel. It's like
he did.
Now, but what's so cool is like, that's how I am in my life. And I'm like, I can't relate to these godly men and women in the Bible, but you can, because you realize that even the ones who were like prophets of God were still just like us with their frailties and stuff. I draw a lot of
God used them.
And absolutely,
if God can speak through a jackass, he can speak through anybody. I mean, absolutely. That's what I always say. Don't think that you're all this special just because God uses you, because he used a jackass to speak to somebody once. So I'm just saying,
Absolutely.
But yes, well, Brian, thank you so much for taking precious time out of your day. I will make sure that we promote those books, and guys, all the information's below the video. Make sure you check out his website so that you can get on his mailing list and get all the latest information of the stuff that he puts out. He's prolific, and he's so entertaining, and I just have enjoyed your work so much. So it was an absolute thrill to have you at the Writing Cafe, and I just pray that you continued many years of writing enjoyment, so that we can be entertained too.
Thank you so much, Carla.